Good evening, and welcome to Social Lens. Tonight, we are addressing one of the most complex and persistent challenges in our society: homelessness. The question at the heart of our discussion is both direct and deeply divisive. Should governments provide free, unconditional housing for every person experiencing homelessness? Is this a compassionate and effective strategy, or a fiscally irresponsible policy with unintended consequences? To argue in favor of this proposition, we are joined by Dr. Liam Chen, a respected urban policy expert and a prominent advocate for the Housing First model. And to provide a counter-perspective, we have Eleanor Vance, a senior fellow at the Institute for Public Policy, whose work focuses on economic sustainability and social responsibility. Welcome to you both. Dr. Chen will begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Isabel. The debate over housing for the homeless often gets lost in complex economic models and political rhetoric, but I want to begin with a simple fundamental truth. Housing is not a luxury good or a reward for good behavior. It is a fundamental human right. It is the very foundation upon which a stable, dignified, and productive life is built. The measure of a just society is how it treats its most vulnerable members, and by that standard, we are failing. The approach I champion is called Housing First. The logic is not complicated. It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to tackle life's other challenges without a roof over your head. How can we realistically expect an individual to find and hold a job if they don't have a place to shower, store their belongings, or get a consistent night's sleep? How can someone begin to address deep-seated trauma or mental health issues when they are in a constant state of survival, worried about where they will be safe for the night? Housing First removes this primary crushing burden. It provides stability as the non-negotiable first step. From there, other support services for mental health, addiction, employment can be offered voluntarily and are proven to be far more effective. Now, I know Ms. Vance will raise the issue of cost, and it's a valid concern, but it is based on a flawed premise. The truth is, chronic homelessness is already astronomically expensive for taxpayers. We are already paying. We pay through frequent and costly emergency room visits, which serve as a primary healthcare source for many on the streets. We pay through the significant resources consumed by law enforcement and the judicial system in managing public order offenses related to homelessness. These are reactive, inefficient, and incredibly expensive ways of managing a crisis. Providing permanent, supportive housing is a proactive investment. Numerous studies have demonstrated that it's significantly cheaper to house someone than it is to leave them on the streets. This is not about giving a handout. It is about making a strategic, evidence-based investment in human potential, public health, and the long-term economic well-being of our entire community.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Eleanor Vance, your opening statement.
Thank you, Isabel. And I want to begin by finding common ground with Dr. Chen. Homelessness is a profound tragedy, and the impulse to solve it with a direct, compassionate solution is understandable. We all want to see every person in a safe and stable home. Where we diverge is on the method, its feasibility, and its consequences for society as a whole. Dr. Chen speaks of housing as a right, but we must be clear-eyed about what that entails. Implementing a policy of free, unconditional housing for all would represent a fiscal commitment of staggering proportions. Where does this funding come from? The cost of acquiring or constructing, and then perpetually maintaining these properties is immense. It would necessitate either substantial, economy-slowing tax increases on working families and businesses, or devastating cuts to other essential public services. Are we prepared to sacrifice funding for our children's education, our public transport infrastructure, or healthcare for our aging population to fund this single program? This brings me to the principle of fairness. Think of the millions of individuals and families in this country who are on low incomes. They work one, sometimes two jobs. They make sacrifices, and they struggle every month to pay their rent. What message do we send to them if we say that housing, their single biggest expense, will be provided for free to others with no conditions attached? It risks creating a deep and damaging social friction and a perception of profound unfairness. Furthermore, we must consider the risk of unintended consequences. While proponents like Dr. Chen are driven by compassion, such a policy, however well-intentioned, could create a powerful disincentive to work. It risks fostering a culture of dependency on the state, rather than empowering individuals to achieve self-sufficiency, which should be the ultimate goal of all social policy. The better path is not a simple, one-size-fits-all solution. It is a holistic, and yes, conditional approach. We should robustly fund the very services Dr. Chen mentioned: mental health care, addiction treatment, and job training programs. Housing assistance should be a powerful tool within this framework, a goal to be worked towards, and a support for those actively engaged in their own recovery and reintegration. It should be a hand up, not a handout.
Thank you both for your comprehensive opening remarks. Let's dig into the specifics. Dr. Chen, you argue this is a long-term saving. Eleanor, you call it an unsustainable burden. Eleanor, could you respond directly to Dr. Chen's claim that the current system of managing homelessness is actually more expensive than providing housing?
Certainly. I acknowledge the data Dr. Chen refers to, which shows that in certain contexts, the cost of emergency services for a chronically homeless individual can exceed the cost of supportive housing. However, this argument has a critical flaw: scalability. These studies are often based on small, highly controlled pilot programs that target a very specific, high-needs subset of the homeless population. To extrapolate those findings to a universal, national policy is misleading. The sheer capital expenditure required for construction or property acquisition on a national scale is a figure that these studies conveniently ignore. Then you have the immense and perpetual costs of maintenance, utilities, security, and the administrative bureaucracy needed to manage such a system. These fixed costs would dwarf any potential savings from reduced emergency calls. It's one thing to save money on a few dozen people in a pilot study. It is another thing entirely to build and run a parallel free housing system for hundreds of thousands of people. The financial reality is simply not there.
Dr. Chen, your rebuttal?
This view, with all due respect to Ms. Vance, is incredibly short-sighted. The argument about scalability is a common excuse for inaction. It frames this as a simple line-item expense, rather than a fundamental investment in the fabric of our society. Yes, there is a significant upfront investment, of course there is, but the do-nothing approach also has compounding costs that we are already paying. Consider the lost economic productivity, the strain on our public spaces, the generational trauma of children growing up in unstable environments. These things have real, tangible economic costs that are far harder to quantify, but are arguably much larger. A healthier housed population is a more economically productive one. They pay taxes, they participate in the local economy, they raise healthier children who are less likely to need state intervention themselves. This isn't just about saving money on ER visits, it's about building a stronger economic base for the future. Viewing this through the narrow lens of a 5-year budget plan misses the forest for the trees. It is an investment, not just an expense.
Let's turn to the human side of this equation. Eleanor, you've raised concerns about disincentivizing work and creating dependency. Dr. Chen, from your perspective, how do you ensure that providing a home doesn't inadvertently become a barrier to personal ambition and contribution to society?
I have to fundamentally reject the premise of that question. The idea that people experiencing homelessness lack ambition is a damaging stereotype. Their primary, all-consuming ambition every single day is survival. They are not lazy, they are exhausted. Their entire mental and physical energy is devoted to finding their next meal and a safe place to sleep. It is the absence of housing that is the barrier to ambition. By removing that constant crushing stress, we don't remove ambition. We create the mental space for it to flourish. For the first time, a person can think beyond the next 24 hours. They can think about a resume, about going back to school, about reconnecting with family. And let's be clear, housing first is not housing only. The model provides a home alongside voluntary access to a suite of supportive services. The data shows that when people feel secure and respected, they voluntarily engage with these services at a much higher rate. It's about empowerment, not entitlement. We are giving them the tool they need most to rebuild their own lives.
Eleanor, your response to that? Is making support voluntary enough?
Dr. Chen speaks with great passion, and his belief in human potential is admirable. However, policy must be designed based on realistic assessments of human nature, not just optimistic hopes. To make all support services purely voluntary is, I believe, a critical flaw. Homelessness is often deeply entangled with severe challenges, like substance addiction and mental illness. These conditions can impair judgment and diminish a person's capacity to make long-term beneficial choices. The path of recovery and seeking employment is difficult, uncomfortable, and requires immense effort. Human nature suggests that if there are no requirements or expectations, a significant portion of recipients, while enjoying the stability of the housing, may not take that harder path. They may remain isolated and disconnected from the workforce and community. This is where the hand-up, not a handout model becomes crucial. Tying housing assistance to active engagement with services creates a partnership. It says we will provide this essential foundation for you, and in return, we expect you to be an active participant in your own progress. This isn't punitive. It's a framework of mutual responsibility that leads to better, more sustainable outcomes and true self-sufficiency.
We are nearing the end of our time. I'd like to ask you both for a brief closing statement. Eleanor, could you please summarize your position?
Absolutely. We all share the same goal, to end homelessness. But a policy of unconditional free housing is a well-intentioned but deeply flawed solution. It is fiscally unsustainable. It is fundamentally unfair to millions of hardworking taxpayers who struggle to pay their own rent, and it risks creating long-term dependency rather than fostering independence. The truly compassionate and effective path is a pragmatic, multifaceted strategy that prioritizes treatment, training, and personal responsibility. Let's invest in people, not just in buildings, and give them the tools to build their own future.
Thank you. Dr. Chen, your final thoughts?
We have been managing this crisis with the same failed reactive policies for decades, and the problem persists. Continuing down that path is the definition of insanity. Housing is the essential foundation. It is the platform from which everything else becomes possible. It is the most compassionate, most effective, and in the long run, the most economically sound strategy we have. We face a choice. We can continue to spend billions managing this crisis in our emergency rooms and jails, or we can make a courageous investment in people, in stability, and in the future of our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Chen and Eleanor Vance, for a truly insightful and spirited discussion. Tonight we've heard two distinct visions. One that frames housing as a fundamental human right and a strategic investment, and another that emphasizes fiscal caution and a framework of mutual responsibility. It is a debate with no easy answers, but one that is crucial to have. Thank you for joining us on Social Lens. Good evening.